Hello everybody, this is Michael Hollands once again for Film Music Media. Today I'm talking to none other than two-time Grammy Award winning and Golden Globe and Academy Award nominated composer and music producer Harold Faltermeyer. Already in the late 70s, Harold had made a name for himself by, for instance, collaborating with Giorgio Moroder, either writing or producing songs with him for artists such as Donna Summer or arranging music on films like Midnight Express, Foxes and American Gigolo. On American Gigolo, Harold had met producer Jerry Bruckheimer, which ultimately led to Harold writing the score for Thief of Hearts, which was also produced by Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson, the producing team for which Harold would later write highly iconic scores for Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2 and Top Gun. For those movies he wrote two of the most recognizable themes of the 1980s. Besides his large film score credits of Beverly Hills Cop, Top Gun, as well as Tango and Cash, The Running Man, Fletch and Cuffs, Harold also worked with some of the most high-profile artists such as the Pet Shop Boys, Donna Summer, Billy Idol, Jennifer Rush, Bonnie Tyler, Melissa Manchester, Laura Branigan, Barbara Streisand and Udo Jürgens, and many others. This year we'll see the release of his autobiography as well as the premiere of his new musical. Welcome, Harold.
Hi, Michael.
Harold, at first I would like to hear more about your musical training and education.
Right. So, I mean, it all started with the fact that my family was always surrounded by music. My father was a very gifted piano player. My grandpa was a very good violin player. However, they've been never pros. This was all an amateur playing, but they were really good. So as a kid growing up, I saw music and I heard music in our house all the time. And this created the urge to do music. So I asked my dad, can I have like piano lessons? So he was pretty happy about that, and so I got piano lessons. The problem was that with every lesson you have to study and you have to learn, and this was not really my piece of cake. So up until now, I'm not a really great piano player because I just didn't want to practice so much. But I found out that it is a destiny for me. Music is a destiny, and while having the lessons, my teacher found out that I always listened to the music and I played it back in the right key. So he said, you have to, I don't know, maybe or maybe not, he has perfect pitch. So I got checked by a professor of friends of ours who was a music professor in Nuremberg, and he testified that I have perfect pitch. So this was a great news for the parents, you know, and so it all led to one thing led to the other. So I started to be more musician and more while my background and my whole school education suffered because I just did music. So it all collided at some point, and I had to leave school. I'm a real school dropout, but I managed to get accepted in the Munich Music College, and so I did study eight semesters of music in Munich, and this was a very unique thing because I didn't graduate, you know, and of course I couldn't graduate on the college, but I studied trumpet and intensified my skills in piano and learned a lot about music. And parallel to that, I got a job at Deutsche Grammophongesellschaft as a sound engineer, first as a technician, and these two professions, music and engineering, was a very, very good pairing, obviously. It was pretty unique back then. Today it's a common practice that musicians are sound engineers or know about all the software instruments there on the market these days. But back then it was unique, and this was my start into my musical career.
Great. Harold, when was the transition to your work with Giorgio Moroder made, and how did you two work together?
It all happened back in roughly '77. He had a studio a little north of our studio. It was like 2 miles apart, these two studios. And Munich is a pretty small music market, or was a pretty small music market. And of course, he heard of my work in the studio. It was called Arco Studio, and because we had an engineer, Jürgen Koppers, who unfortunately died a couple of years ago, but he worked for Giorgio and he worked for me as well sometimes. So he told the stories, and he told Giorgio, "There's this kid you have to probably check out at one time. He's crazy. He's behind the mixing console. On the other hand, he has strings outside. He conducts strings from the console, and he plays all the keyboards and synthesizers. And you might want to check him out." So Giorgio, at one point, Giorgio called and said, "Could we have a meeting and maybe work together?" And I said, "Of course, I'm very honored," because he was a big producer and he was very successful already. And so he called me over to Musicland Studios, and the first thing we did together was Midnight Express.
Okay. I think in 1979, if I'm not mistaken, you were involved with the Bad Girls album,
Right.
the Donna Summer album. How would you describe your experience with Donna Summer and, well, the working process for this album in particular?
It was interesting because it all came together because of the fact that Casablanca Records tried to produce a album with Donna with all standard hit songs, or with some standard hit songs in some kind of disco sound. So Giorgio called and said, "You know what? Give me a couple of demos of," and I recall the first thing was "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina." So he said, "Make a disco version out of that because we're going to try that with Donna." So I did, and the outcome was more or less lousy. It was not really good. It was not. Of course, it was not a really great idea. And he said, "But you did quite a good job. Maybe I take you to Los Angeles to arrange Donna's new album." I was, of course, very, very happy about that announcement. And then Donna came in and said, "I know you." And I said, "Well, of course I know you." And she said, "How?" And I said, "Well, how could you know me?" So she said, "You know, when I was in Munich at the first time, playing a role in the musical Hair, at night after the show, we used to go to a club in Munich, and I recall that you played there." I said, "Yeah, it was the Tavern. It was a very famous club where the GIs met back then, and I was playing organ then." And then Donna came in sometimes, and she sang with us. She sang like Aretha Franklin songs or something like that, and that's how I met her the first time. And so I got called into Los Angeles, and we started with Bad Girls, and I was just hired solely as an arranger and keyboard player. But Neil Bogart, head of Casablanca Records, made an announcement, and he said, "We want to do a double album, a double feature album like we did before, and she's going to be the first artist who has like 2 consecutive double albums on the market. Her first double album was Life and More with the hit MacArthur Park on it." So she agreed to that, Giorgio agreed to that, but the problem was they only had 12 songs for a single album. So where to get the songs from? Giorgio said, "Well, Harold, just go to a studio and try to write something. I cannot promise you if Donna's going to take it, but we desperately need songs." So I went to a studio together with Pete Bellotti and Keith Forsey, and the first thing we wrote there was Hot Stuff. And of course, then I was not only a keyboard player, I was a songwriter. And this was a very, very lucky punch, and a lot more to come.
Great. I love the Bad Girls album, and Hard Stuff is definitely one of the standout songs on that release. I really like that one.
Yeah.
When compared to a film score deadline, how much different would you say is the experience working on a pop music album in terms of pressure and deadlines?
Well, basically, for a movie, for a score, you never have time, and this was a little better back then when I started doing music, because we were not in a digital world back then. You had the movie on film, and the music was on magnetic tape. So whatever you played for the producers and for the director had to be transferred to magnetic tape with the sprockets, and then it had to be synced with the picture. So it was a process where you had some time to breathe. But in today's market, everything is digitized. So a director will make his own cut in the evening after he shot all day long, and then the next thing what happens, you get the finished scene in the evening, and he expects you to have the music finished by the next morning. So this is pretty crazy. It's a very crazy schedule, and of course the pressure is high. And since you are called in at the point where the movie is more or less ready, there's basically no time left for breathing. You just have to do it. You have to work day and night, and to make it work. For example, with Top Gun, there was a scene. I just saw Top Gun, funny enough, a couple of weeks ago, because they had like a 30th anniversary downtown LA. Bruckheimer invited, and so I saw Top Gun again, and I looked at the scene where Tom Cruise's partner dies while he hits his head on the canopy of the jet. And there's this music which is later called Memories. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I did it, it was like I had a demo with a synthesized guitar back then, with a very, very simple sampler, and just a really cheesy guitar sound, so to say. And I played it for Bruckheimer, and he said, "Great, give it to me." I said, "No, Jerry, we need to put a guitar on there." He said, I don't have any time, and of course we don't have the money, and give it to me. I said, "Jerry, this is a demo." So actually, we ended up using the demo in the movie. So you see how tight scheduling is.
Crazy. The Memories piece was actually only released on the special edition Top Gun soundtrack. It wasn't exactly in the initial recording. And you met Jerry on American Gigolo, right?
Exactly.
And how did the collaboration with him and Don Simpson come about?
So I mean, I must have left some memories, obviously good memories from American Gigolo. So one day in '84, Bruckheimer called and said, "Look, we are doing a movie. Would you like to do the score? We would like to have you do the score." And I said, "Of course, I would be very honored." He said, "The only thing is we need you immediately. We have to do this thing, and I don't know, maybe they have fired the previous composer. I don't know, but anyway, I got called in, and so a couple of days later, I find myself in Los Angeles in a cutting room and looking at Thief of Hearts. So at that time, Bruckheimer Simpson were already called the Golden Boys, because they were so successful. They had their own lot in the Paramount lot. It was like an own building, and I remember in front of the building there were two black Ferraris parked, and this was the Don Simpson, Jerry Bruckheimer production office. So they were larger than life. I mean, so they could do anything. Thief of Hearts, unfortunately, was not a success. It was a flop. But obviously, I did good music, and in the middle of producing the music for the movie, Jerry came up and said, "You got to meet the director of our next movie, Martin Brest." So I said, "I'd be happy to." So I said, what's the movie about? He said, yeah, it's a comedy. You know, it's totally different than the Thief of Hearts movie. But, and of course it needs totally different music. But I first wanted to meet the composer, the director, and then you will see. And I have to see if you guys like each other, then we can go from there. So I go over again and to Paramount and met Martin Brest. We obviously liked each other, and I got the job for Beverly Hills Cop.
I heard several times that Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer could be very detail-specific and demanding. How would you describe your work relationship with those two, well, powerhouse producers?
Well, this is the truth. Jerry and Don turned every stone, every minute and every second. So whatever we did was in question. He always questioned the sounds. And of course, he knew back from my work with Moroder that I can be very, very fast. I can really, and I had my stuff together. I had a great setup for working. So obviously, these were the beginnings of MIDI routing. So actually, you could change any sound on the fly. Mm-hmm. So this was the beauty for them, you know. And then I recall Don Simpson saying, you know, we always like to come to the studio because this is the fun part of the movie, to see how the music is done, and of course make suggestions and try out things we never can try out with shooting, because it's just too expensive. So of course they could be very, very annoying sometimes, because you had to change everything. Once something was finished, and Don looked at Jerry looked at Don. Don said, what do you think? Jerry said, I don't know. Don said, I don't think it works. Marty Brest said, can we try this? Can we try that? And they could drive you crazy. But at the end, most of the times they were right, because turning every stone leads to a variety and unexpected sound combinations, and sometimes that is really, really interesting, and that's what it was.
The first Beverly Hills Cop and the second one as well are basically two of my favorite movies of the 1980s, and there is something that has really always interested me, and I've got a good question. When the first Cop was released and the soundtrack album followed, only Axel F was featured on the album, and no additional score pieces were included. And on Beverly Hills Cop 2, actually there was no score at all, whereas your score for Thief of Hearts had multiple score cues, like 4 or 5. Is there any rational explanation as to why some albums were more song-oriented and had one piece of score music, and others had more?
Yeah, it was due to the fact that back then soundtracks were selling enormous. We had millions and millions of records sold with soundtracks. I mean, all the big things like Saturday Night Fever or whatever, they sold millions. And of course, we had a company for releasing the soundtrack, which was MCA Records, mm-hmm. with its CEO Irving Azoff, and Irving Azoff made a clear announcement. He said, "I don't want to have a score album. First of all, I paid too much money to get the soundtrack. I want to have hits. I have to recoup." I was pretty annoyed by that statement. So I said, "But there has to be something of the score on the soundtrack." So his response first was, "There has to be none of the score on the soundtrack. We might do you a favor and get you a spot that you can do one little piece of score on the soundtrack." So I said, "Yeah, well, thank you then." And I talked to Don and Jerry, and they said, "Well, of course there has to be some music of the score on the soundtrack." But on the other hand, of course, we understood Azoff, because he wanted to have a hit record, and pieces of score is not really that what you would call a hit record. And back then, of course, nobody knew that the tremendous success of Axel F basically, and then afterwards, helped the movie to sell. So I got a chance to collect pieces of the score and made like a puzzle. Axel F was never a piece of music; it was a puzzle. I just took different pieces of the single cues and just tied them together.
Yeah.
And made a mix out of that, and this was Axel F. And he said, "Yeah, I'm putting it on, and you get a second chance. We just do Shootout, which was like another piece of music which didn't make it to the album, but made it to almost every B-side of the single releases out of that soundtrack." So Axel F was scheduled to be the B-side of a Patti LaBelle song of New Attitude, and as we said back then, in no time the record turned around. The B-side was the A-side, and the A-side was the B-side, and of course, it was the first days of doing remixes. So we had a couple of guys doing remixes. So Lucilas did a remix of Axel F. And then all of a sudden it became a big club hit. And I definitely proved Ace of wrong that he said that scores are not selling. I mean, this was a big thing. And as a matter of fact, Axel F was the most selling single release out of all the single releases we had out of Beverly Hills Cop.
It was a huge hit, and it is still so very popular today. And I think it's one of those pieces I think everybody knows, even if they are not too familiar with the film. But if you play the piece, it will go, "Oh yeah, I totally know that one." One of the pieces which were also missing was. It was called the Discovery, the scene in which Eddie Murphy discovers the cocaine in the coffee grounds, and it was also a piece which I would have liked to have on the which I would have liked to hear on the soundtrack album, but unfortunately, due to the circumstances you just mentioned, it was impossible.
Yes, it unfortunately was impossible, and believe me, I'm getting mails up to today. Saying, when do we get this music released, and when do we get like Discovery, when they like you said, when they discovered the cocaine in their warehouse? Why was this never released? I'm getting so many mails about that. And the good news is that Paramount changed changed their mind to release the entire score now. So actually, in fall, it's Beverly Hills Cop 1 and Beverly Hills Cop. All the scores are scheduled for release.
Correct.
And that's really great. And this is something my fans have waited now for decades already. I don't know.
Tell me about that.
How many thousand mails I have collected about that matter, and it is. I tried to release the soundtrack, to release the scores, and I requested a couple of times a license to do that. Paramount always denied, but now they obviously changed their mind, and that's a great thing, I think, and I'm really happy about that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's about time, actually. I mean, there are a couple of soundtrack labels that have released a substantial amount of scores,
right,
which never saw the light of day before that. And I was saying to myself for years, why on earth is nobody releasing, Cop 1 and 2? Because there is obviously potential. The fans are, the fans basically want to hear the music. They want to buy the music, and I'm absolutely happy now and thrilled that those scores are finally released in their entirety.
Right. Now it's going to happen. That's really great news. Great. It just happened recently. I just got the word like a month ago.
Great. That's really good news. I've got one more question about Beverly Hills Cop 2. Back then the director had changed. The first one was directed by Marty Brest, and the second one was directed by Tony Scott, whom you had worked with 1 year before on Top Gun. Mm-hmm. Would you say that Tony had the main influence on how the scores have to sound, or did you feel that Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer were calling the shots in terms of composition and sound.
Well, I mean, the two movies are completely different, as you can tell.
Yeah.
The first one is more towards the comedy. This is of course because of the talent of Martin Brest. Martin Brest had a very, very fine sense for comedy.
Yeah.
And for little details, how Eddie Murphy was playing the role, and how this whole thing got put together. Tony Scott was a total different director. Mm-hmm. He was very visual. Tony Scott had the best eye, I think, ever. If you look at Top Gun, how this is shot, the camera work and all that, it's all visual. So Cop 2 obviously was very visual. Was a very visual movie with fast cuts and fast scene changes, and of course, although we used a lot of Beverly Hills Cop 1 from the score, we used a total different scoring technique in the new stuff I put on, like you look at the robbery at Adriano's, where you have this very hard driving rock and rollish kind of music, which never could have made it in Cop 1 because it's a total different story. And Marty Brest would have shot this robbery completely different if he even would have shot it, you know. But that's the way it is, and of course you have to adjust your work accordingly to the work of the director.
Okay. In the late 80s, you did Tango and Cash, mm-hmm. and it's another one of those examples where I was, waiting desperately for a score album to be released, and several years later, I think in 2006, it finally was released. And after Tango and Cash, I believe it was, you made the decision to return to Germany. Could you perhaps give me some insight on that transition, Hollywood back to Germany, and what's prompted you to make that decision?
It had to do with family planning, to be honest with you. I said this was the time, Tango and Cash was the time where my first daughter was born. Mm-hmm. And actually when I did Tango and Cash, I had her like a little toddler in Los Angeles together with my former wife. So we said, do we really want to live here with a kid? So this was one decision. I said, no, I think we are better off to really raise the kid, and we wanted more, and then we got more kids. To raise the kids back in Germany, we are, you have to know that we are living in a great environment, a little outside Munich. That's where I was born and raised. That's where my parents lived, where my whole family lives and still lives. So we made a decision, and we said we're gonna go back. The decision helped, of course, one fact that the only movies I got offered back then were like cop movies. Mm-hmm. I tried very hard to get a job for an animated movie, for a Disney movie or whatever. But my agent and the entire industry always kept saying, nah, he cannot do that. We just know him for his work in cop movies and in hard driving action movies. So this were all the offers I got. And of course, at some point, I mean, the last one I did back then was Cuffs with Christian Slater. Yeah. And it was another cop story. So it's just, it gets very redundant, and you get tired of doing all these cop movies. And of course, Beverly Hills Cop got copied multiple times, like in different stories. And of course, the time for synthesizer music in conjunction with action movies was outdated. It was done, and I actually didn't find a new way to do something different, because I mean, you had these new instruments, and the trend went back to the big orchestras, and of course all of a sudden, like Hans Zimmer got very fashionable with his kind of work,
Yeah.
which is great, which is really great work. And he was at that time he was just the more current and the more modern guy than I was, you know. So I said, well, anyway, I have to go back. I have to just take a rest and have to breathe again. And who knows? I'll be back, but I need some time off and do something different. And of course, projects like Pet Shop Boys also helped, of course, to get over that. And these were things which I did back in Germany. And I put the movie business aside for quite a while, and worked on different things. And that definitely helped my to widen my horizon, my musical horizon. And it was a decision which I don't regret to this moment, because the kids are now grown up. They have grown up at our compound, and they're well educated, and they are in the world now. And I think I made the right decision.
So basically, you were also typecast pretty strongly back in these days, which is
right.
Yeah, which is something that basically happens all the time, and I think many artists suffer from that greatly.
Of course, you can't help it. I mean, this is Hollywood. You are famous for one style, and then they tell you that's the only thing you can do. I mean, it's tragic, but it's the way it is.
Okay, you just mentioned the Pet Shop Boys, and actually, I was going to ask you something about that as well. You did it in 1990. You produced their album Behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I think, still regarded as one of their finest albums. Did those two, Neil Tennant and Chris Lowe, approach you? Did they seek out you specifically, or did you contact them because you wanted to work with them?
No, they called one day, and my first question was, why do you want to have a third producer? They said, yeah, you know what, our technique and our way to produce records is that we always do something new. I said, well, obviously. And I liked the work of the Pet Shop Boys. You know, I liked what they did with Liza Minnelli, with Dusty Springfield, and what they did for themselves. I mean, this is all great work. So they said, and this time we do something completely new. We only use old vintage synthesizers. Mm-hmm. None of the modern stuff is gonna be on. This was the first days of like plug-in synthesizers, you know, and things like this. So we want to go back to the way of analog vintage synthesizer programming, and you're our guy. So I said, well, I still have lots of the vintage synthesizers back home, and I was thrilled by the idea, because that's my piece of cake. I know how to do that. And as a matter of fact, I even bought more of the old stuff, especially for that recording. And actually, I'm still using it. And this was the sound of Behavior. And it, like you said, it was one of the most highly acclaimed work they ever did. And I'm pretty proud that I was part of it.
Great. As I mentioned in my introduction, Harold, this year your autobiography will be released, and it's going to be called Grüß Gott, Hollywood, mein Leben zwischen Heimat und Rock'n'Roll. Translated basically, hello Hollywood, my life between home and rock and roll. When did you make the decision to write the book?
Well, actually, I didn't make the decision all by myself. This was initiated through my partner in life, Birgit, and she said, you have to write your autobiography, because, you know, whenever I'm telling stories, when we sit in the evening, I have a great memory, and so I can recall stories from that time on the fly. So she said, you have to write your autobiography. It's so interesting. Plus the fact that I'm not your typical like LA rock and roll kid. I have total different tasks. You know, I'm on one hand, I'm like the title says, Grüß Gott Hollywood, and this says so much. It's my life. It's my my way of life. It's my my let's say it is to love nature on one hand and to live a total different life than the music life on one hand, and then go back to Hollywood and live crazy Hollywood life, and live up what Hollywood is known for, like fast working, and back then, of course, party hard. These were the two things, and there's so much to tell, and so I finally agreed to do the autobiography.
Right. So basically, fans can look forward to quite a few inside stories, I think, about your Hollywood days and work with other musicians, recording artists, and also directors. Then, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. This is going to be the story, and like stories of Bruckheimer Simpson and Marty Brest when they came into the studio and turned my work around. This is all documented in the autobiography.
Great. It's going to be released in September, that's correct?
Yeah, September 8th is the release date.
Okay. It's going to be released in the States, in Germany, and also across Europe. Are there any plans?
The first release is in the German-spoken territories, like Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and we have an English version finished already. As a matter of fact, I wrote the autobiography in English together with a ghostwriter. And so the first manuscript was the English manuscript. And then we had it translated into German. So actually, we have the English version finished, and it's currently negotiated to bring it out. I guess it's going to be next year, and so it is going to be a worldwide release.
Great. Since you have worked with so many people, and I think you have an enormous amount of stories to tell, how many pages will there be? Is it like a thick, like a massive?
Yeah,
book?
it's pretty substantial. It's going to be a hardcover, obviously, and it has almost 300 pages.
Great.
And if I would have continued to tell stories, it would have probably been 500 pages.
Do you believe that, you will tell several inside stories like you just told? Do you think that you on purpose cut out certain stories because you felt you might have told something which is offensive, or maybe should not see the light of day, if I may ask that question?
Well, of course, you have stories and anecdotes which I would call classified. You're not talking about certain things. So it's and of course you write it. And these days, it's all a legal question as well. So you're not. So you have a book overlooked by like a legal department of a publishing company.
Yep.
And they will tell you can't write that, or do you have permission to write that from the people you're writing about? So you have to be careful to not insult somebody, right,
Yep.
or anybody. So of course we went through that, and but I think we had a pretty clear view of what we want to tell and what we don't want to tell at the beginning. So not a lot of stories got really cut out. Maybe some got a little modified to fulfill the needs of the legal departments. But basically, I'm not a bad guy, It's and that bad story. So it's not. It is the story, and it's a true story, and it is nothing I really have to cut out.
Also this year, I think in August, your new musical will premiere, which is called the Oktoberfest, the musical, an almost true story.
Right.
How long did you actually work on this project, and what can the fans expect?
Yeah, it's a total different Faltermeyer. I wrote a musical back then in Vienna.
Yeah.
Which was my second musical work. The first one I did was with Hildegard Knef. But what we do now is a very, very hard driving, very, very funny story about the Oktoberfest. And when I got approached with the project, and the producer said, well, you know, we have a writer, we might have a writer, it's Phil Lasepnik. He worked for Disney, and he wrote a couple of really iconic scripts like Mulan, Pocahontas, and The Prince of Egypt. So, and we have him on board, and we need the composer, and we are thinking about you. And then I said, pretty arrogant, I said, well, look, who else could do it? I mean, I have to do it because I'm, first of all, I'm a native Bavarian. I'm a native Munich kid. Second, I'm quite successful in international markets. So I know the Bavarian folklore. I know the rock and roll side. I know about musicals. I can write a musical. So whom else would you take? You need a Bavarian guy, don't you? So that, yeah, we need a Bavarian guy. It probably helps. So to make a long story short, I got the job. So I started. What are you doing with a musical like that? Are you just doing music, or what's it gonna be? So I met Phil Lasepnik, and we sat there for some while, and we said, how do we start this whole thing? And we started with a visit in the Nymphenburg Castle in Munich. And we looked at the Schönheitengalerie, the Gallery of Beauties, you know, when King Ludwig I had his 36 paintings by Karl Josef Stieler, the court painter.
Yeah.
And we looked at all these women. And we said, well, that's definitely an aspect of the story. You have to show the girlfriends of Ludwig, right? And so we started to intensify our thoughts. Whom are we getting into this gallery of beauties? And of course, a glamorous figure back then was Lola Montes. She was the mistress of Ludwig. So it's a very sizzling story. So Philip came up with the idea. You know, we have to have, of course, on one hand we have to have like the music. We have to have like Bavarian folklore music at one point, but then, of course, what are we doing? We are telling a story. We are telling the story of the Oktoberfest, and this was the great idea Philip had, to create two stories, two parallel stories. First of all, you entertain the people with of course you serve them a beer and you give them a pretzel on one hand, and then on the other hand, you have the story told. And Philip, I mean, he's really great at. He came up with the idea that we have two figures in the play. One is the producer of the show, and the other one is a MC, a master of ceremonies, which the producer hires. And the producer thinks, the MC thinks, I have to just tell the fun story, and the only thing we want to have this evening is we just have fun, we drink beer, and we sway, and we have a good time. And she says, no, I hired you to tell the people the true story. So what's the outcome of that is that the story is gonna be told, and it's of course sometimes shifted to a almost true story. That's why it's called the almost true story. So it's very clever written, and we are just in the middle of rehearsals, and we have a wonderful director, Madeleine Dahm, who really knows her business, and she's doing the choreography as well. And whenever I come home in the evening after the rehearsals, it's a joy, and it's very, very pleasant to look back the day what she did, and I'm pretty sure we get a really, really cool show together.
Harold, your first musical, which was also played in Vienna, made it to an album. Certain selections were released on CD. Do you think the same is going to happen with this musical, that certain parts will be released on CD or maybe even DVD?
I'm pretty sure about that. As a matter of fact, we had talks recently about that. Of course, when we put out a soundtrack, and we would call it, of course, the original cast album, it has to sound great. You know, there's so many. The Vienna original cast album we did back then was basically we really did all the orchestral stuff, you know, and so it's like a more or less a live performance, right? But with this one here, because it has so many different styles of music, I probably would do like a fusion of our orchestra and some studio work as well, and then of course have our original actors on that record. But it's gonna be done, and I'm not sure if we have it ready by the opening night, but it's gonna be pretty close to the opening night. We have a soundtrack album out.
Great. Okay, and now we've spoken about many things in the past and also current projects. The release is coming up, the premiere of the musical, also your autobiography. Are there any future plans, projects you've already mapped out? If you can talk about it.
I mean, when you do a musical and you do it like we did, and I mean being very quick in what you're doing, I think the next thing what I would love to do is do another musical. Mm-hmm. I mean, certainly if we would be successful with this one, we would do one anyway. I have another one in the pocket where I have the script, which I might do next. Then there is going to be a best of album, which is going to be released actually parallel to the release of the autobiography. Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting, unique album because it's not just your regular best of album. It's what I call a composer's cut album.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you will hear of course a couple of my hits of Donna, for example. Hot Stuff is gonna be on. But then you probably will hear a couple of new versions of Axel F is going to be a new version. I did a couple of months ago.
Okay.
And you will hear the theme out of Fletch, which is going to be re-recorded.
Oh, great!
And Memories from Top Gun is going to be recorded, and of course with a real guitar then. And we might even have the opportunity to release a non-heard version of The Heat Is On or Shakedown, you know.
Great.
So it's going to be like a composer's cut. Things you have in movie business, you have the director's cut. You have the cut. A director wants to hear or to see his movie, and which he couldn't do for several reasons, like time considerations or taste considerations, marketing considerations, or whatever. But the director's cut is always like something that the director always wanted to do, you know. Mm-hmm. So I've invented the word composer's cut because, of course, with film music, you are tied into timing and tied into certain bars, certain scenes, and you cannot do what you really wanted to. So, but with a record like that, you can do whatever you want, you know. So that's what I'm gonna do, and it's gonna be released through my own label.
Okay.
And it's gonna be available when we have the autobiography released.
Great. That's really an interesting project to have this composer's cut idea. That's really good news. Yeah, I mean, Shakedown, I actually forgot to mention that. Shakedown is one of my favorite movie songs, actually. I think it opened the movie when the main credits of Cop 2 start. It starts the film in such an energetic way, and it was even Oscar nominated, that song. Mm-hmm. Back then. It's a really great song.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Harold, I think I have run out of questions. I would really like to thank you for your time, for taking time out of your busy schedule. I really enjoyed the interview, and I hope you did too.
It was my pleasure.
Yeah, it is an honor to be able to speak to you, and thank you so much for your time.